"Mom, we did it." She whispered the words into her mother's ear, clutching her diploma as the crimson robes of Harvard billowed around them. Her mother, a janitor fired from a luxury office years before, could only cry in response. And 3 rows back, watching in stunned silence, was the CEO who had signed her termination papers. He never imagined their paths would cross again, and certainly not here. This moment was over a decade in the making. The graduate is Maya Rodriguez. The woman crying is her mother, Elena, who spent years cleaning offices after being dismissed from one under devastating circumstances. And the man watching is Robert Thorne, former CEO of Astrid Ventures. Their story is a collision of memory, ambition, and a single decision that altered 2 families. To understand the profound weight of this graduation, we must go back to where it all fractured. In 2008, Elena Rodriguez worked the night shift. From 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., she moved through the empty, gleaming offices of Astrid Ventures, a rising tech investment firm in Boston. Her world was one of vacuum cleaners, chemical sprays, and the silent hum of servers. Her paycheck, just over $28,000 a year, had one singular purpose: to keep her daughter, Maya, in a decent school district. Every scrubbed floor and emptied trash can was a direct investment in a future she could barely afford to imagine. Maya was 12 years old, a quiet girl with a fierce intellect that had already caught the attention of her teachers. Elena kept a folder tucked between cookbooks in their small kitchen. It was filled with Maya's report cards, all A's, and notes praising her aptitude in mathematics and science. Elena would look at them after her shifts, her hands raw from cleaning, and feel a tired pride that burned away the exhaustion. She had left an unstable life far behind, and this job, as difficult as it was, represented stability. It meant rent was paid. It meant food was on the table. It meant hope. Meanwhile, on the top floor of that same building, Robert Thorne was building his legacy. Astrid Ventures was his creation, a firm that identified and funded disruptive startups. His philosophy was one of ruthless efficiency and aggressive growth. He was celebrated in business journals for his Midas touch, a man who could turn $1 million investment into a $100 million exit. The culture he fostered was high pressure, competitive, and intolerant of perceived waste. This included the operational budget for facilities. To Robert, the night cleaning crew was a line item, a cost to be optimized. He rarely, if ever, saw them. His world was one of board meetings, pitch decks, and quarterly returns. The people who maintained the physical space he occupied were ghosts, invisible by design. But a chain of decisions was about to make their paths collide in the most devastating way. The pressure point arrived in late 2008 as the first tremors of the financial crisis began to shake the markets. Portfolio companies were missing targets. Investors were getting nervous. Robert demanded across-the-board cost reductions from every department. A memo went out to all managers: identify and eliminate non-essential expenditures. For the building operations manager, a man named Derek, the directive was clear. His budget was being slashed by 15%. Derek saw 2 options: upgrade to more expensive but longer-lasting equipment, which required a large upfront investment, or cut personnel. The math was simple. Letting go of one full-time janitor would cover most of the required savings immediately. His eye fell on the schedule, on the workers who were least connected to the daily operations of the firm. Elena, a reliable but quiet employee who kept to herself, became a statistical probability. But statistics don't tell the whole story. What the spreadsheet didn't show was that Elena had, on 3 separate occasions that autumn, reported minor security lapses she noticed during her rounds. A propped-open fire door, an executive's laptop left unsecured in a conference room, a suspicious person lingering in the lobby after hours. Each time, she filed a report with building security. Each time was logged and ignored by an overworked security director. These reports, intended to protect the company, inadvertently painted a target on her back. To a manager looking for a reason, she could be framed as a problem, someone who noticed things she shouldn't, who created paperwork, who rocked the boat. The stage was set. On a cold night in November, Derek called Elena into his cramped office at 7 a.m. just as her shift was ending. He did not offer her a chair. He cited a vague, fabricated incident involving mishandled confidential documents, a shredding bin she was alleged to have left unsecured. He claimed an internal audit had flagged it as a critical compliance failure. The truth was, there was no audit, there were no documents. It was a pretext, clean and efficient. Elena stood in her worn work coat, her mind reeling. She tried to explain, to defend herself, but the decision was final. Her security badge was deactivated. She was escorted from the building by a silent security guard. Her final paycheck would be mailed. Just like that, 10 years of stability vanished into the frosty morning air. The drive home was a blur of panic. How would she pay rent in 30 days? How would she explain this to Maya? The folder of report cards in the kitchen now felt like a cruel joke. But what Elena didn't know was that the manager, Derek, had made a critical error in his rushed paperwork. He had filed the termination under specific company policy that required a formal, witnessed review of the alleged violation, a review that never happened. This wasn't just unfair. It was a procedural violation that created a legal thread, a tiny fiber of justice waiting to be pulled. But pulling it would require a strength Elena wasn't sure she had left. The first month was a freefall. Elena applied for unemployment, but the company contested it, citing the alleged misconduct. The process would drag on for months. She sold what little she had of value, a small television, a necklace her own mother had given her. The rent on their apartment became an insurmountable mountain. By January 2009, they had to move. They found a single room in a shared house with 2 other families, their world compressed into 400 square feet. Elena took any work she could find, day cleaning for private homes, stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight. The jobs were sporadic, the pay was cash, and there were no benefits. The folder of Maya's achievements remained in a box, a painful symbol of a future slipping away. Maya watched her mother shrink. She saw the exhaustion that no sleep could cure, the calculated silence when bills arrived. But instead of breaking, Maya internalized the struggle. Her schoolwork became her fortress. While her mother worked overnight shifts, Maya would study at the kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp her constant companion. She understood, with a chilling clarity for a 13-year-old, that education was not just a path to a dream anymore. It was a weapon. It was their only way out. A pivotal figure entered their lives during this time, Mr. Ellis, a weary but brilliant calculus teacher at Maya's public high school. He noticed the new intensity behind her quiet demeanor. He saw the same worn jacket every day, the free lunch voucher she tried to hide. One afternoon, he asked her to stay after class. He didn't ask about her home life. Instead, he slid a textbook across his desk. "This is beyond the curriculum," he said. "If you can solve the problems in Chapter 8 by next week, I'll know you're wasting your time in my class." It was an invitation. Maya took the book, and by the following Monday, every problem was solved, with elegant, concise work shown in the margins. Mr. Ellis became her unofficial mentor, channeling donated funds for advanced placement exam fees, writing glowing recommendation letters, and quietly ensuring her name reached the right people. While Maya built her academic arsenal, Elena fought a daily war of attrition. The anger over her firing curdled into a hard, cold knot in her stomach. She thought about fighting it, but the prospect of taking on a powerful venture capital firm with its teams of lawyers felt ludicrous. She was a single mother fighting to keep the lights on. What she didn't realize was that the firm's internal chaos was creating an unexpected opportunity. The financial crisis was hitting Astrid Ventures hard. Robert Thorne, under immense pressure from his investors, instituted a second, deeper round of cuts. In the resulting upheaval, the building operations manager, Derek, was himself laid off. He left the company abruptly, taking his files and his shaky justifications with him. Years passed. Maya's brilliance became her trademark. She graduated high school as valedictorian, her speech a poignant tribute to the unseen sacrifices of working parents. A full scholarship to a state university followed, a victory that made Elena weep with relief. But Maya had already set her sights higher. The state school was a step, not the destination. She worked 3 on-campus jobs, sent money home whenever she could, and maintained a perfect grade point average. Her goal, whispered to Mr. Ellis during a college visit, was now crystalline: Harvard Law School. It was no longer just about success. It was about authority. It was about learning the language of the system that had failed her mother. Back in Boston, Robert Thorne had navigated the crisis. Astrid Ventures had stabilized, even prospered in the recovery. He was now a fixture on 40 under 40 lists, a speaker at tech summits. The unpleasantness of the late 2008 layoffs was a buried memory, a necessary business decision. He had never known Elena's name. To him, she was a line item corrected, a cost eliminated. His own daughter, Isabel, was now attending an expensive private preparatory school, her path to an Ivy League school assured by legacy connections and a substantial donation he'd made. Two parallel tracks of education, fueled by vastly different currencies, were running side by side. The trigger for the next act came from an unexpected source, a letter. In 2014, as Maya was entering her final year of undergraduate study, Elena received an official-looking envelope from the Massachusetts Department of Labor. It was a routine notice about unclaimed wages from a multi-year-old class action settlement involving a different company entirely. It was a mistake, sent to her old address and forwarded. But the bureaucratic language about wage disputes and worker rights sparked something. A stubborn, long-dormant thought resurfaced. What if her termination wasn't just unfair, but illegal? With Maya's help, she began to research. They spent nights in the university library, Maya translating legalese. They learned about at-will employment and the exceptions. They learned about procedural requirements for termination based on specific policy violations. Elena remembered the manager's vague words about confidential documents and an audit. She had signed nothing. There had been no hearing. Using her daughter's student access to legal databases, Maya found the internal Astrid Ventures employee handbook from that era, archived online. They cross-referenced the policy Derek had cited. It explicitly stated that a termination under that clause required a documented investigative review and a signed acknowledgement from the employee. Elena had never seen such a document because it had never been created. They had found the thread. It was thin, but it was real. A procedural violation that transformed a simple, cruel layoff into a possible case of wrongful termination. But pursuing it meant voluntarily reopening the deepest wound of their lives. It meant confronting the past head-on, with no guarantee of victory. Maya, now a young woman with the fierce protectiveness of a child who had seen too much, was ready for the fight. Elena, still carrying the scars of that frosty November morning, was terrified. The decision hung in the balance, a silent war between fear and justice. And it was at this precise moment, as mother and daughter debated their next move in their cramped living room, that a separate, unrelated event was set in motion at Harvard University. The admissions committee for the law school was finalizing its list for the next graduating class. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't just an acceptance to Harvard Law School, it was a full ride, a prestigious public service scholarship that covered everything. Elena held the thick, creamy paper, her hands trembling so violently the words blurred. This was the weapon forged and delivered. For Maya, the moment was validation. For Elena, it was vindication. It was also the catalyst. "Now we fight," Maya said, her voice calm with a new, steely authority. "We fight with the law. I am going to learn." The battle commenced on two fronts. At Harvard, Maya immersed herself in employment law, torts, and civil procedure. She was no longer just a brilliant student. She was a strategist gathering intelligence for a very personal war. She sought out professors who specialized in labor law, framing hypothetical questions that mirrored her mother's case. She learned the language of depositions, the art of discovery, the precise weight of procedural failure. Meanwhile, armed with their research and Maya's burgeoning knowledge, they approached a small non-profit legal aid clinic that specialized in workers' rights. A young, idealistic attorney named Sarah Chen took Elena's case. Sarah saw past the years that had passed. She saw the clear violation in the employee handbook, the lack of documentation, the suspicious timing during mass layoffs. She filed a formal complaint against Astrid Ventures for wrongful termination, seeking back pay, damages for emotional distress, and legal fees. It was a David and Goliath move, but David now had a sling woven from Harvard library books and a decade of pent-up resolve. At Astrid Ventures, the legal complaint was a nuisance, a piece of paper routed to the legal department. It was assigned to a junior associate who saw an old, small-dollar case from the recession era. The standard protocol was to offer a minimal settlement to make it go away, a few $1,000s, a standard cost of business. A settlement offer was drafted and sent to Elena. It included a standard non-disclosure agreement. To the firm, it was closing a file. To Elena, it was an insult. The amount wouldn't have covered a month of their lost stability. Signing it would mean silencing her forever. she refused. This refusal triggered a shift. The case was escalated within the legal department. Someone pulled the old personnel file. The file was thin, conspicuously thin. The manager Derek's notes were vague. The required investigative report was missing. The junior associate, now slightly concerned, sent a routine inquiry to the former operations manager, Derek, asking for his records or recollection of the incident. Derek, now working at a different company and wanting no trouble, emailed back a short, evasive reply. "I handled it according to policy at the time. I don't have any files from that long ago." This triggered a red flag for the law firm representing Astrid. A missing file and an uncooperative former manager meant the company's defense relied solely on a policy they couldn't prove they followed. The cost-benefit analysis changed. They advised their client, Astrid Ventures, that while they could likely win by outspending Alina, the lack of documentation created a real risk. They recommended a higher settlement, perhaps $20,000, to ensure the problem disappeared. The new offer landed in Sarah Chen's inbox. She discussed it with Alina and Maya. $20,000 was significant. It could pay down debt. But Maya, looking at the number with her new legal eye, saw something else. "They're afraid," she said. "They're offering more because their case is weak. They don't want this to see a courtroom." She argued against settling. Alina, trusting her daughter's hard-won judgment, again said no. They would proceed to discovery. This was the "it gets worse" moment for Astrid Ventures. Discovery meant they would have to formally answer questions under oath. It meant Robert Thorne's name might appear on a legal document. The general counsel of Astrid, wanting to shield the CEO from any connection to a messy, small-time lawsuit, made a critical error. He instructed the outside law firm to be aggressively defensive, to bury Alina in paperwork, to file motions to dismiss on technicalities, to make the process so exhausting and costly that she would have to give up. It was a standard corporate tactic. But they were not fighting a typical plaintiff. They were fighting a woman whose co-counsel was a Harvard law student with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Every aggressive motion was a lesson for Maya. Every document request was a puzzle. She and Sarah Chen worked nights, weekends, turning the firm's tactics against them. When Astrid's lawyers filed a motion claiming the statute of limitations had passed, Maya helped Sarah craft a counter-argument about the fraudulent concealment of the policy violation, keeping the case alive. War of attrition was on, and then a seismic revelation. During the discovery process, Astrid's lawyers were compelled to produce all internal communications related to the 2008 cost-cutting initiative. Buried in thousands of emails was a chain between Derek and the then head of HR. In it, Derek, seeking approval for the termination list, wrote, "Need to cut 1 FTE from custodial. Rodriguez is the least visible, but heads up, she's filed a few security reports. Might ask questions." The HR head replied 1 minute later, "Approved, handle per policy, keep it clean." This was the smoking gun. It wasn't about confidential documents. It was a candid admission that she was chosen because she was least visible and might ask questions. The fabricated reason was a pretext. This email transformed the case from a procedural error to a potential case of retaliatory termination for raising good faith security concerns. The damages estimate skyrocketed. A copy of that email found its way to the desk of the general counsel, and from there, it was deemed serious enough to briefly reach Robert Thorne. He was preparing for a keynote speech and glanced at the memo. A wrongful termination case, a janitor, a decade ago. The name Rodriguez meant nothing. He skimmed the summary, saw the damaging email from a manager he barely remembered, and felt a flash of irritation at the incompetence of past subordinates. "Just settle it," he told his general counsel. "Don't let this become a distraction, but do not admit liability." His involvement began and ended with that sentence. He had no idea that the plaintiff's daughter was, at that very moment, ranked at the top of her class at Harvard Law, just miles from his office. The case was now a major liability. Astrid's lawyers came back with a substantial settlement offer, $150,000, plus a formal letter of reference for Alina. It was a life-changing sum. Sarah Chen advised taking it. The trial would be another year of stress with no guaranteed outcome. Alina looked at Maya, who had dark circles under her eyes from juggling the case and her studies. The fight had given Alina her voice back, but it was consuming her daughter. Reluctantly, they agreed. The settlement was finalized. There was no admission of guilt from Astrid, but the money was a tangible confession. Elena Rodriguez had won. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. They had forced a giant to pay, but the giant never really looked them in the eye. The CEO, the man whose signature was on the culture that allowed her mother to be discarded, remained a distant, untouchable figure. Her mother had closure, but Maya's hunger for justice had merely been whetted. She threw herself into her final year at Harvard with a new, focused intensity. She was going to graduate not just with honors, but with a purpose. And as fate would have it, Robert Thorne's own daughter, Isabel, was now a junior at Harvard College. Seeking to strengthen his legacy and his network, Thorne accepted an invitation to join the Harvard Board of Overseers. His first major event would be the upcoming graduation ceremony for the law school. He agreed to attend and present a corporate award for ethics in business, a cruel irony he was completely blind to. The invitation list, the seating chart for dignitaries, and the list of graduating students were being prepared by 3 separate administrative offices. A perfect storm was being scheduled, one that would bring all 3 characters into the same frame for the first time in over a decade. The distance between the balcony and the main floor was about to collapse. Graduation morning dawned clear and bright over Cambridge. For Elena, dressing in her simple floral blouse felt like putting on armor. The settlement money had brought stability, but this day, watching her daughter walk, was the true restitution. She clutched a small purse, her hands steady now. Maya, in her crimson gown, was a portrait of poised triumph. The years of struggle were etched in both their faces, but today those lines spoke of endurance, not defeat. Across the city, Robert Thorne adjusted his tie in the mirror of a luxury hotel suite. He reviewed his notes for the brief presentation he would give. The Corporate Ethics Award was a box to check, a networking opportunity. He arrived at the ceremony in a chauffeured car, was ushered to his reserved seat among other dignitaries and donors in the 3rd row. He scanned the program, his mind already drifting to a conference call scheduled for that afternoon. The ceremony began with the processional. A sea of crimson flowed into the courtyard. Elena, seated in the general audience section, strained to find Maya's face among the hundreds. When she spotted her, a wave of emotion closed her throat. She whispered the words we heard at the very beginning, "Mom, we did it." It was a promise fulfilled. As the dean began to speak, Robert's gaze wandered over the crowd. He noted the pride, the diversity of families. His role as an overseer made him feel a part of this institution's legacy. Then, during a lull, he saw her, a woman a few rows ahead and to the left, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. There was a fleeting, vague familiarity, a face from a distant past. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the generic nostalgia of the event. The moment of collision approached silently. Maya Rodriguez's name was called. As she ascended the steps to receive her Juris Doctor, the dean read a short, remarkable bio. Maya Rodriguez, graduating magna cum laude, recipient of the Public Service Scholarship. Prior to law school, she advocated for workers' rights, providing crucial research for a landmark wrongful termination case against a major financial firm. She joins the Justice Initiative next fall. The words wrongful termination and major financial firm landed in the quiet air with specific gravity. Robert Thorne, half listening, felt a minor professional curiosity. He watched the bright young woman shake the dean's hand. He saw her scan the crowd, find her mother's face, and break into a radiant, beaming smile. He followed her gaze. His eyes moved from Maya's face to the woman she was looking at. The woman who was now crying tears of pure joy, her expression one of absolute victory. The vague familiarity snapped into horrifying focus. The personnel file photo, the name from the settlement memo he had approved without a second thought. Rodriguez, Elena Rodriguez, the janitor his company had fired over a decade ago, the mother of this Harvard law graduate. A cold shock, like a splash of ice water, ran through him. The disconnected dots connected with brutal speed. The wrongful termination case his firm had settled. The landmark research the dean mentioned. The brilliant daughter. The woman he had made invisible was now the most visible person in his world. Her triumph was a direct, living rebuttal to his every assumption. The distance between the 3rd row and her seat was only about 30 feet, but it felt like a chasm he had spent his career digging. He did not move, he could not look away. His prepared speech on ethics in business sat in his pocket like a sick joke. The staged, confident expression he'd worn all morning melted into a pale, genuine shock. He saw the whole story in that instant: the struggle he'd caused, the resilience it had forged, the towering achievement it had motivated. His own daughter, Isabel, was receiving a degree in art history from a good school, a path paved by his money and influence. This woman's daughter had earned a higher degree from a better school, on a path paved by survival and sheer will. The comparison was devastating. Elena, feeling the weight of a stare, turned her head. Her eyes met his. For a long, silent second they held. There was no anger in her gaze, no accusation. There was simply a profound, quiet knowing, a recognition that she saw him, truly saw him for the first time. And in that look was everything: the cold office, the lost home, the years of fear, and now this supreme moment of victory. She did not smile, she did not frown. She simply acknowledged the truth of their shared history, and then she turned back to watch her daughter, her work complete. The ceremony continued around them, a river of pomp and circumstance. Robert remained frozen, the noise fading into a buzz. The award presentation was called. His name was announced. He stood on autopilot, walked to the podium, and delivered his short speech. His voice was flat, his words hollow. He presented the ethics award to a corporate lawyer from a fossil fuel company, the irony so thick it was almost palpable. He returned to his seat, but he was no longer there. He was reconstructing a decade of decisions through a new, unforgiving lens. After the final applause, as families swarmed the courtyard, Robert watched from a distance. He saw Maya embrace her mother, the two of them laughing and crying, surrounded by a few friends and Maya's old teacher, Mr. Ellis. It was a picture of authentic joy, untainted by his presence. He saw Elena look over Maya's shoulder, her eyes finding his one more time. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not of forgiveness, not of reconciliation. It was a nod of closure. An acknowledgement that the ledger in her eyes was now settled. Then she linked her arm through her daughter, and they walked away, disappearing into the celebrating crowd. For Robert Thorne, the walk back to his car was the longest of his life. The conference call was forgotten. He sat in the quiet back seat, the image of those two women seared into his mind. He had spent his life measuring value in deals closed and returns generated. Today, he was forced to measure the cost, the human cost of a line item, the generational strength that could rise from the ash of a single injustice. He had come to present an award for ethics, and instead, he received the most powerful lesson in it he would ever know. And here is the final, surprising detail. That fall, Maya Rodriguez began her job at the Justice Initiative. Her first assigned case was a class-action lawsuit against a large retail chain for systematic wage theft. The lead attorney on the case was Sarah Chen, the same lawyer who had taken her mother's case. The student had become the colleague. The personal fight had become a professional calling. The cycle of justice, once sparked in a cramped apartment over a law library book, was now beginning anew with a Harvard-educated lawyer at the wheel. The story did not end in that courtyard. It simply entered its next, most powerful chapter. So what are we left with, after the caps are tossed and the crowds disperse? Two families, forever linked by a decision made in a moment of financial panic. One path was altered by a pen stroke on a termination form. The other path was forged in the fire of that injustice, hardening into a diamond resolve. This story is not about a dramatic courtroom showdown. It is about the quiet, years-long confrontation that happens in library stacks, in late-night study sessions, and in the unwavering heart of a parent. It asks us a difficult question. In our pursuit of efficiency, of quarterly growth, of optimized bottom lines, how many human potentials do we inadvertently truncate? Robert Thorne did not set out to destroy a life. He set out to save his company a few $1,000s, but systems have consequences. Treating people as line items creates a collateral damage that spreads across generations. The true cost was never on a balance sheet. It was in the lost sleep, the silent dinners, the fear in a child's eyes. And ironically, it was also in the creation of a formidable adversary, a lawyer whose entire career was born from understanding that system's flaws. Elena and Maya's journey teaches a different calculus. It teaches that resilience is not a personality trait, but a muscle built rep by painful rep. That education, when pursued as a tool for liberation, becomes the most powerful equalizer society has. Their victory was not the settlement check. It was the diploma. It was the unassailable credential that could never be taken away, bought, or falsified. It was the ability to walk into any room and command respect that had been denied to her mother. The final image of the CEO sitting 3 rows away is the perfect silent reckoning. It is the past meeting the future it never anticipated. It is a reminder that the walls we build between classes, between job titles, between the boardroom and the janitor's closet are often illusions. Life has a way of dissolving those walls in the most unexpected places, and in that dissolution, we are all forced to see ourselves clearly. Perhaps the greatest lesson here is about legacy. Robert Thorne built a legacy of wealth and corporate influence, a name on a building. Elena Rodriguez, through her sacrifice and steadfast belief, built a legacy of knowledge and justice, a name on a Harvard degree. One legacy is a monument. The other is a living, breathing force for change. Which one truly endures? If this story resonated with you, share it. Share it with anyone who needs a reminder that our current circumstances do not define our destiny, that setbacks can be setups for comebacks written in ways we cannot yet imagine. Your own journey, your own quiet struggle matters. Keep going. Thank you for watching. For more stories of resilience, justice, and the unexpected turns of life, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new chapter. Until next time.